Hi, this is Tim Winters, and I'm the Director of Media Development at National Amateur Sports. And in our series of training videos to support the VNN Athletic Zone websites, this topic today that we are going to be discussing is how to conduct a good interview. We're not looking for anything great here. We are just looking for the best type of interview that you can provide to support the content on your Athletic Zone website. Now, this is not going to be a journalism class, but it will provide you a solid outline to understand what goes behind a good sit down or post game interview. We'll talk about all the elements involved. So take notes, and here we go. So one thing that is important to understand is that there are a lot of elements and a lot of different type of interviews that you can conduct. So we will be discussing all of that during this particular session, whether it's going to be an over the phone type of interview or a sit down interview or something that's done via online like Zoom or Google Meet. And we'll talk about post-game interviews and the basic elements needed for that good interview. Now, there are a lot of steps to follow. You might want to take some notes on this, but this is just a good general outline. Do you need to follow each and every step? Well, it would be good to follow the majority of steps, but try to get this ingrained. And after a while, they start merging into each other. And when you go out and start conducting interviews, or you're at home conducting an interview online, you'll have a lot more confidence knowing that there are a number of different things and steps that you need to follow. So in this outline, we will talk about the researching of your topic and your subject matter, determining how you will do the interview, setting the expectations with the subject of the interview, letting them know exactly where, when, how much time would be needed to conduct that interview, and then obviously consider the questions involved. Listening is the most important element, believe it or not, of an interview, because that will allow you to ask the follow-up questions, not just pointedly, shooting out questions that you might have on a notebook. Taking the lead in the interview. Don't let the subject matter go off point and start talking over the time that you might have allowed for this particular interview. So you need to take charge, and we'll discuss that. Avoid stealing the spotlight or talking about yourself. Remember, it's not about you. It's about the person or people that you are interviewing. Ask hard questions if they needed to be asked. Don't ask them just for the sake of asking the hard question. But if there is something that needs to be discussed, but you're a little tentative, go for it. Ask that question. We will discuss being aware of the awkward pause and what to do when that occurs. Always respect their time, show gratitude as you're wrapping up, and then the follow-up to the interview. So researching your topic, obviously, this is crucial in starting out your interview process. Learn as much as you can about the subject before you start the interview. And you can use a number of different things. Obviously, you can go online and try to search out, read local newspaper clips, check their social media background. You might have some insight into things that they've posted, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter or X. Determine how you will do the interview. As I said right at the onset, there are a lot of different interview types, whether it's going to be a stand-up interview, a prepared sit-down interview. This might be a sit-down at home where you're on a Google Meet or a Zoom call, and that person could be down the road or across the country. So you need to consider the type of interviews that you are going to do. So that will obviously hinge on the time that you might have allowed to do the interview, and physically, if you're going to do an on-site interview, you have to allow for that time to get to the interview to set up that interview. So think about everything that is important in determining how you will conduct the interview. And once you've established that type of interview, then you can talk about the specifics, the date, the time, the location, and if it's going to be a Zoom or Google Meet, providing those links involved to execute that particular interview. Setting expectations. This is very important when you are speaking to the subject matter before the interview, when you're talking about scheduling the interview, provide that subject matter and outline. Let them know what you're working on, why you want to speak to them. What you don't want to do is provide a list of questions beforehand. Sometimes the subject matter will ask that, and the best way to go around it is just say that you're still researching the topic and formulating your questions, but do not try to send out the questions beforehand. You want this to be their reactions to be, right off the cuff when you're asking the question, not where they can sit and prepare and have thought out their answers. And also set up the time expectation. That's really important. Whether it's going to be a 20-minute interview or a 30-minute interview, that subject matter should at least know that, so that they are understanding that they are going to have to cordon off some time on their schedule and that you adhere to that time. So that is a very important aspect of setting the expectations for a good interview. Consider the interview questions. Don't read off a list of questions. Instead, write down key questions and avoid asking the closed-end questions that result in a yes or no response. You don't want to ask those type of questions, because then you're left with, oh, yes or no, and then how do you follow up on that? So you'll have to then do extra work and reword that question. So try to list key topics that you want to discuss, and then listen during the interview to ask those follow-up questions. That's really going to be important in the course of the interview. In the answer that the subject gives you, maybe ask for more specifics or details, especially if you are not understanding of exactly what they have said to you. Ask them to clarify or ask them to be more specific. It's important also, like I said, to listen to their answers. That would prompt more questions. And then when you end the interview, make sure that you ask, is there anything else that you didn't cover? You might have researched everything, but something might have come up in the course of that particular story outline that you weren't aware of prior to the interview. And if you ask that question, is there anything else that we didn't cover? Then that's something that might prompt that subject matter to say, oh yeah, there is something I need to discuss that. So that would help as well. And end the interview by asking, is there anything else that we didn't cover? You don't know, by the time that, from the time that you've researched your story and outlined your questioning to the time that you actually meet or conduct that interview, something might have occurred within the last 24 hours and that you might not be aware of. And it might go unnoticed, and the subject matter might not even think about bringing it up. So ask if there's anything else that you didn't cover, and that might prompt that person to remember, or might just say, no, there is nothing else. But you never know unless you ask. So that's really important when you're considering the interview questions, wrapping everything up with asking, is there anything else that we didn't cover? Take the lead. Just remind yourself that you are the interviewer. You are in charge. You need to keep the interview on track and steer the conversation. Sometimes a subject matter will get very wordy and very talkative and start going off tangent and start talking about different things. And you don't want to seem like you're being rude, but you did allow for a certain period of time, which you set that expectation with the subject matter. So just remind them that you need to keep on track, and that you have a limited amount of time that you need to cover a number of different details in your interview. Remember that interviews are a two-way conversation. Avoid talking about yourself. Remember, it's the subject or the people involved that you're interviewing. You're needing to get their best answers and information. And if you're talking about yourself, that might